everyone, Alec Elger the SideQuest Gamer here, and Star Fox, the epic game for the Super Nintendo that sadly no one ever talks about. When you hear Star Fox, people automatically think, oh, you talk about Star Fox 64, this is like the best game ever, oh my god, I love it. No, this is the original Super Nintendo game, and it's sadly forgotten about, even by Star Fox fans. I wonder why that's the case, but without further ado, let's review the game. Star Fox is a third-person and first-person rail shooter for the Super Nintendo that famously utilized polygons rather than sprites. This game was developed by Nintendo themselves, but the game wouldn't be possible without the help of Andross Software, who worked closely with Nintendo as early as the NES days. They experimented with 3D gaming and even made a prototype game called NES Glider, originally for the NES, but later ported the prototype to the Super Nintendo, but they could only go so far with the Super Nintendo's hardware capabilities, so they told Nintendo that, and Nintendo acknowledged the limitations, and Argonaut programmer Jez San hired chip programmers to work on what would become the Super FX chip, and if I'm not mistaken, Nintendo funded the project themselves. With the chip completed, Nintendo themselves programmed the Star Fox game from character design to level design and even music. So you could argue that Argonaut Software could be credited as a co-developer because the game wouldn't be possible without the Super FX chip, but Argonaut didn't work on the game themselves, contrary to semi-popular belief. Although Argonaut Software would eventually collaborate with Nintendo for development of Star Fox 2 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, too bad that game got cancelled as Nintendo 64 was eventually going to be released and they wanted to focus on that console instead of the Super Nintendo. And I've played a somewhat finished ROM of Star Fox 2 on an emulator because somebody leaked the beta and they patched it and all. And it's one of the best games that never came to be. It's too bad, really. One of these days I have to revisit that game. The story, well, if you've played the highly revered Star Fox 64, it's exactly the same as that. It involves mad scientist Andross being exiled from Corneria for his illegal experiments, and he's hiding out on the planet Venom. He then abruptly invades the Lilat system because, why not? He's an anthropomorphic monkey, he's a mad scientist, and he has the funding to build a vast fleet, so yeah, invasion happens. So mercenary team Star Fox, which includes veteran pilot Peppy Hare, the analytical rookie pilot Slippy Toad, the skillful yet hot-headed Falco Lombardi, and their leader Fox McCloud, is then deployed on a journey to Venom, where they constantly battle many enemies from Andross's fleet. Depending on the route you take, the journey can either be very easy or very challenging. Level 1 is obviously the easiest route in the game and only gets tricky by the 4th level. Then you have your work cut out for you, let's just say, but I love the Space Armada level as it's really showing off the capabilities of the Super FX chip. The second route is the medium difficulty, and for its unique levels alone is probably my favorite of the 3 routes. I love Titania, as it's kind of an ice world, but if you go through a certain device, the planet will warm up, and the end boss reveals it's actually a water-based planet. Sector Y, however, is an interesting area where aggressive manta rays roam, and I got so many game overs due to the unavoidable brown manta rays eating away my lives. Many lives later, I realized that when they turn blue, they're not aggressive, so shoot the brown ones until they're blue and leave the already blue giant manta rays alone. The third route is by far the most challenging in the game. While Corneria has minor changes in Route 2, Route 3's Corneria is Sunset, has different enemies and obstacles, and a harder boss battle. Then it's just standard flying throughout another asteroid field, and Fortuna is a fun level except Master Dodora, easily the worst boss in the game, and you'll see what I mean once you fight it. But the most notable change is the final boss having an entirely new phase, which I won't spoil, but it makes the boss battle all the more climactic. All of the levels are engaging to play through, only in 1 or 2 boss battles does the game even feel unfair. Some of these levels do get easier with level memorization, especially Meteor and the low draw distance it has, but I really like how they look and how they're designed. Titania and Space Armada are great examples of creative level design, but as for controls, they take some getting used to, admittedly. You can actually choose 4 different control schemes from the start of the game, and I always went with Control Scheme A because it felt the most comfortable for me. I have to admit the barrel rolls with L and R buttons are fun to pull off, and I must mention you must do a barrel roll if you want to get past the second and third routes. It's also great for sharp turns, most notable in Meteor. I must also mention this because many Let's Plays of Star Fox I've seen, people forgot that pressing select goes from first person to third person view in certain levels, although transitioning from each view takes 5 seconds, so switch only when you're clear of enemies, or those 5 seconds will be perfect for the enemies to shoot you down because you're a sitting duck. Star Fox 64 does remedy this problem to an extent, although first-person view in that game sucks when compared to the original. I'm sorry, but cockpit view in Star Fox 64 is so nauseating and disorienting that I just always played the game in third-person view. The best times to use first-person view, in my opinion, are in the asteroid levels and Venom orbit levels. Otherwise, don't use it, as I found it hard to dodge indestructible obstacles unless I was in third-person mode. But other than that, I found this game to be quite engaging. It's not a long game, as each route is about an hour long if you know what you're doing, which I don't mind since this is one of those beaten one sitting games. It's not my favorite design choice, although if you accumulate enough points from shooting down many enemies in each level, you'll get a continue and can get up to 3 if you're really good. It is easier to get continues on the harder routes as there are more enemies to kill, but that also means you'll likely be using up those continues. So the game never feels unfair or cheap. Even when I got several game overs, I didn't feel cheated out of a victory, and knowing it doesn't take long to reach the point where you left off, it's not the worst feeling in the world, unlike getting a game over in the first 2 Sonic games. I especially love the music of the game. If you've been on the internet long enough, you probably know the Corneria theme by heart, although I honestly prefer the Armada and Asteroid themes. I also love the victory theme for level completion as it's very happy and upbeat. The music conveys a sense of fast-paced action and occasionally atmosphere like in Meteor. I just love the soundtrack in general. It kind of reminds me of Star Wars soundtrack in a sense, but not really. I'd definitely give it a listen if you go on YouTube. But the question is, does this game still hold up? I know there are many people who say this game didn't age well for the graphics alone, and I'll be the first to admit that while I like the art style it went for, they do look a little polygonal. But good thing it was just spaceships they had to render, which you can make as blockish as you want and get away with it. But when fighting Master Dotaro, which is supposed to be an organic being, it did take me out of the immersion a little bit. People are also quick to point out that due to a lack of a targeting reticle in first-person mode, that it's inferior to later entries and makes it unplayable. I'll be honest, I never felt the need for a targeting reticle in this game. I do prefer the charge laser in 64 and Assault, but it's really not the end of the world as enemies were designed with the normal and bomb weapons in mind. So despite the graphics, I think Star Fox has held up well enough. I wouldn't say it aged well, but I wouldn't say it aged poorly either. The most important part is that it's still a fun game to play, and I have absolutely no nostalgia for this game whatsoever. In fact, this game is so much fun, I'm actually kind of afraid to go back and play Star Fox 64, as I played that one a lot as a kid, but I don't know, we'll get to that later. But so far, I think Star Fox is just as good as the beloved 64, maybe even better in some aspects. I would say it handles pacing a lot better than the sequel, but like I said, I'll make the comparisons on my next review. So, my final score, I would give Star Fox a 95 out of 100. Even after all these years, it's still a great rail shooter, and probably in my top 50 favorite video games of all time. I just wish this got a virtual console re-release for the Wii U eShop, especially with Star Fox Zero supposedly coming out this year. So only time will tell before we see the original Star Fox getting re-released. Until then, you can buy it used or you can emulate it, although for the latter, get a PC gamepad as I can't imagine playing that reflex-heavy game on the keyboard. So that's Star Fox, one of my favorite Super Nintendo games of all time, and heck, one of my personal favorite games of all time. Now, I'll be taking next week off from reviewing video games, but in its place, I'll have a top 10 list since you all seem to really like my top 10 list. In fact, my top 10 Super Mario games bypassed 1,000 views, which may not seem much, but it means a lot to me. So I'll be doing that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this review of this rather underrated Super Nintendo games. And as always, remember to stay awesome.